Hey guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel today. We got our good friend back on here today, Chad Maves from Reed's Custom Food Plots. He is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to food plots. That's why we have him on here. We're going to be talking about something uh, perfect for this time of year. Food plots are going in the ground. I'm sure a lot of you guys are trying to figure out what you're going to be planting, when you're going to be planting. So we're going to get him on today here and just kind of talk about what he feels like is maybe one of the best food plot varieties or things that you could be planting on your property come this season. Chad, take it away.
Yeah, as Mike said, I'm Chad. I work for a company called Genesis Custom Food Plots. I'm actually a partial owner in it now, but I'm going into my 12th season. So yeah, I've planted a lot of acres in 12 years. Probably more than I got to be qualifying for maybe planting more food plot acres than anybody around. But I guess I won't make that claim quite yet. But yeah, the magic blend. Yeah, if you want to get me riled up, we'll start with that. But I've tested it to no end, and there is no such thing. Like, I will come out and say that for a positive, is what works for one guy is doesn't do anything for the other guy. And I have tested this on almost every crop we have, and it's like our blend. I'll throw a couple examples out. So like our fall blend usually has a couple cereal grains in it and some brassicas, which some guys say can't be planted together. I prove that up and down it can. It grows a beautiful crop. But my biggest buck to date was killed on that blend opening day of Wisconsin in the middle of September, which that blend usually doesn't get real good, especially the cereal grains around by us, till middle of October. So I planted 3 plots within 30 miles the same day, the same blend at the same time, well, within 24 hours of each other. And I killed my buck opening day on one property that was in the middle of the three. And this is in central Wisconsin. There was a dozen deer hitting it every night. They were absolutely pounding it. And the other plot hardly ever got touched. And the third plot, they started hitting it really hard end of October, which is a lot of times the case, was that stuff's the last thing green and so on and so forth. So what I learned with that, the plot where I killed my buck, it was a fairly new plot. I think it was more, and it was in a high egg area. There was good alfalfa around there. There was corn. I was not expecting the deer to be there, honestly, till later, because there's an alfalfa field there. Alfalfa's king. But if the alfalfa's too old and mature, it's no longer king. And I think it was more important, that being a new plot. A lot of times when you plow a field or start new ground, it is so nutrient rich because there's no crops that have been milking the nutrients for years, that I think the plants absorb that, and the deer know that. So they're going to go to the plant they can get the most benefit out of. That's where I think guys think they have a magic mix, but you could have a guy planting in Buffalo County or Richland Center here in Wisconsin, and it's like Iowa dirt, real black, real awesome dirt. You can grow anything you want in it. And then he tries that in northern Wisconsin, and yeah, it doesn't turn out because it's sand and gravel and bing, bang, boom. But it's not the seed blend that matters. It's your location. It's what's planted around you, crop rotations. That's everything a guy needs to take into effect. It's the timing that you plant. Like, you could plant cereal grains too early and they get 2 feet tall by opening weekend. Well, they're too mature already. The deer aren't going to want that. So it's such a loaded question, but I do not believe there is a magic mix out there. There's too many other things and other factors that contribute to what makes a mix magic. And I think there's ways to, yeah, try to draw deer to your specific spot, but there's no magical mix that does that. It's it,
So the you might have mentioned it though. When you had those two plots, you were saying that year you killed the one buck on the one and the one didn't hardly get touched. The plot that didn't get touched, was that a plot that you had worked up in the past,
Yep,
or was
these
it
are
a new
all
plot also?
established. No, the one was a new property. It was a new lease, and the other two had been farmed for, I'd say, at least 3 to 4 years. I shouldn't say it didn't get touched. It actually got hammered after our first snowstorm, so it didn't get hit really hard till pretty near gun season, which was odd because that mix usually gets good, like especially the cereal greens. Once we get a few heavy frosts, everything else is no longer green, and that stays green longer because it's a little more cold tolerant. So then they'll really pound it. But
Mm-hmm.
every year is a little different. I've seen it with bean crops too. Typically, once a bean defoliates, they get off it till end of October, November. Then they'll start eating the pods. I've had some years I've watched deer in September just eating pods for whatever reason. They're chewy, they're gooey yet. They shouldn't be eating them, but they are, and they prefer them that time of year. And the next year they won't do that. It changes year to year.
Now, in that situation where you said the deer hit it later, what's your theory on why they hit it later? Was there a different food source in that area that they were preferring earlier over that?
Yeah, that's always $1 million question. So I've seen it. I've had it years, especially by my house. Like last year when it was a real mild winter, I had crops into the spring. I had disc corn under, which I've only ever had that happen one time. And this year I planted the same amount of ground, just rotated my crops, and my crops were gone by the end of December. So the year before that, though, we had a bumper acorn crop. So many acorns that I don't think the deer ever ran out of acorns. I think they're eating acorns all through the winter, and they didn't need to go hit corn and other bean and other fields to get the carbohydrates because they're getting in the woods on acorns and everything else. And we had a bumper apple crop too, where apples pretty near rotted before they got eaten. So yeah, other factors. You get wet years where maybe a farmer leaves a crop stand longer than normal. They're going to eat there if it's in a better area or it's better food, they'll eat on that a lot longer than in other
Mm-hmm.
years. It's everything's just constantly changing, and guys don't adapt with it, and you got to pay attention to what's happening around you and what nature's doing and what farmers are doing, and kind of adjust your plan according to that as best you
Yeah,
can.
absolutely. And that's kind of where I was gonna mention. Usually, when I go into a property and I'm like assessing it, if it's a permission property or a property that we own, um, is I look at the neighboring properties around it because obviously the deer aren't spending 365 days a year on my property, and I'm really trying to just value the landscape and see what is lacking in that area. And usually, what I've done, and correct me if I'm wrong, is I usually target that what I'm lacking and try and provide that for them um, for a specific time of the year. Um, is that something like when you guys are going into client properties or on your own property? Are you doing something similar or are you doing something different?
No, I would say we're doing something similar. So most of our programs, we're trying to provide food year round for the deer. I mean, we're land managers here. We're not just out to kill the deer. Like I've gotten to the point I love planting and managing and providing for the deer almost more than I do hunting them. It's just cool putting that together. But the timing thing's a big thing. So I love hunting September, but most guys are November. Like everybody loves the rut. I'll take September over November any day of the year because I can plan on killing a buck then versus November. You roll the dice and hope he's not on a doe a mile away. But that's a whole different topic. So yeah, you can plant certain crops for targeting like early season. Like for example, I would plant clover, alfalfa, or I'd plant my beans later so they would stay green longer than any of the farmers. So I've done that a few times where I planted beans middle of June, or you can plant longer beans too, 3.0s, 4.0s to stay longer, but then you run the risk of them not maturing at all before they frost. But you can plant beans later so they stay green longer. You just won't get as many pods. So that's going to help you in September, going to hurt you in December. So that's a little bit of a double-edged sword. Planting a longer day bean there is better. But yeah, so you can plant your crops kind of according to when you're hoping to kill deer, and every property is a little different. Like it doesn't pay to plant a summer, like a early season bow hunt type crop if you really don't hold any summer deer and are holding deer early. Like prime example, one of my properties is kind of back. Oh, it's an island back in the middle of a cedar swamp. Typically doesn't get better till later in the fall, so I'll gauge my crops accordingly. I'm planting stuff that I want to last longer and be better
Mm-hmm.
into the fall. So a lot of times, especially in Wisconsin, corn and beans, if you want good late season hunt, you need those because if you get anywhere north of Highway 10, which is halfway basically draw a line in the center of the state and go north, you get 5, 6, 7, 8 inches of snow. Deer don't like to dig anymore. It takes too much energy for the benefit of food. So everything buried in that snow isn't getting dug up. You'll see deer dig, but they'd prefer not to. So if you can have crops standing above that snow line, your money for late season. You'll pull every deer in the area if there's not competing food sources. So yeah, you can plant according to the time of year, especially if you have limited acreage. If you're planting 10 acres worth of food plots, then heck, you can plant for all season and then plant it according to your setups and your locations. And you're going to have better early season setups and better rut setups, and you can plant your food accordingly. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
the fun part of drawing a plan together if you have the acreage. But if you only have one plot and you like hunting November, uh, you got options there. Like for me, if I had a 1 acre plot and I preferred hunting November, I would do beans, plant the whole thing in beans, and I'd plant at least half of it to some type of fall mix, and maybe I'd leave half of it fenced and drop it the middle to end of October, so you made sure and guaranteed you had food coming when you wanted to hunt. Because I've had plenty of times where guys, oh, even frustrating. I've had guys say they've had bucks daylight in September and beginning of October, but they don't like to hunt then. So they wouldn't go out there and try to kill him. Then they'd come back in November and their food plots are demolished and he's gone. Well, yeah, because you had a window of him being there in the daylight and you didn't go kill him because you're stubborn and like to hunt when it's cold and there's no mosquitoes. Well, are you killing deer? Or are you watching deer? There's a difference there. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's the timing matters on what you plant, and that's where the variety of crops can matter too. Like it's kind of what you want to do. If you're an all season bow hunter, it's good to have a variety. If you only hunt certain times a year, I would plant according to that.
Yeah, that has got me kind of got my head spinning. A lot of ideas on properties I hunt as far as am I doing stuff right? Am I doing stuff wrong? I guess for a lot of years, I've come into the mindset that most of the farms I hunt, I have mature deer on them during the rut because obviously they're moving looking for does.
Yep.
Some of them are more early season properties. I always have had the hardest thing I've always had is having a property for late season success. So I've been intentionally trying to target more my food plot strategy for late season to try and kind of prolong the deer either on my property or keeping those mature deer around. It's got me wondering if I should be going the other direction. Should I be focusing, if I have the big deer on my property in September or November or whatever like that, should I be investing more time and money into those plots then instead of later in the year?
Yeah, it's how much food plot or how much acreage do you have is the real question there. So that's what will be the variable. So if you only have one food
Yeah.
plot, it doesn't give you options. But if you got 3, 4 acres, well then I'll talk from my personal experience and why I'll throw my bank out there for September. Not that I want to promote it, but there's less guys in the woods. All the deer are still alive, and besides late season, there's not another time of year you can plan, especially if you got a buck coming to a food plot and you hit a cold front and get that first northwest wind. It is almost a guarantee if he's been out there on a fairly regular basis, he's coming out that night. There's no other time of the year besides late season you can do that. The rut is you can set up a property to be a really good rut area, and I enjoy the rut, but there's always the chance he's on a doe a mile away, and you just can't plan that. And plus, everybody and their brother goes out in November. It's amazing in Wisconsin. You'll see a truck here and there till about October 20th, and then every driveway has a truck parked on it all the way through gun season. Like it's amazing the amount of guys that go in the woods later. So late season food, then the bucks and deer have been, or bucks and deer, the deer have been hunted all season, so you're limited to what's left and highly educated deer. So that's why I love the early season. It was late season. You're really banking on cold and snow. Otherwise, they just seem to stay nocturnal in most cases in highly pressured areas.
I want to throw a few different scenarios out for you. This is just
Sure.
something that came to my mind, and I just want to see what you would do in these situations. So, in each one of these situations, you're going to be hunting a 40-acre parcel. You have an acre to 2 acres of food to plant. It'll be all in one area. Uh, I'm trying to do a scenario that I feel like is kind of the norm for a lot of hunters that might be listening. Um, we're trying to target a deer early season on this property. What sort of planning recommendation would you put in for an early season food plot?
So if I could and the budget allowed it, say I had, let's just say we had an acre and a half, we'll split it. I'm gonna, and this is gonna depend on your setup too and your food plot architecture, but usually say you got a corner of the field or a side of the field, most of the deer are gonna come on. That's just usually how it works. So you're gonna, there's so many variables to this, but your entrance, your exit, all this is gonna go into account. But if I'm targeting early season, I'm going to put a bean in that is going to stay green till its first frost. Now, that gets a little tricky because if it gets frosted out before it matures, you won't have beans for late season. But let's just say that's not your goal. You want to kill one early. I'd put in an acre of beans, and the other half acre I would have down by my bow stand set up with a little water hole with probably clover or alfalfa. Most guys do clover because alfalfa's pickier. It needs perfect soil conditions. It needs the right pH. And if the deer don't eat it down and it gets 2 feet tall, you're in trouble because you need to get that crop off of that field. So it's clover is easier to maintain. So if I had an acre and a half, I would do an acre of beans, try to make sure they're green till they get first frost, and then have clover. It would be the most likely scenario, clover blend. And then I would also throw, if it's a property you know you're hunting for years, get some apple trees in there because deer love apples, and it's pretty much you got everything a deer could want for early season in that plot.
Now, in your beans, are you putting anything else in them, or are you just planting straight beans?
Uh, I would probably just do straight beans. I mean, you could do a corn bean mix and anything else you put on it. The problem with doing a mix in beans is most everything else you put in there is not Roundup ready or ready for any other chemicals, so then you can't spray it. So the good thing about
Yeah.
beans, like all the beans we plant, we're planting them so they can be sprayed. So usually if you're getting a decent bean crop, you spray it right before canopy and they canopy and they'll keep your field weed free. That's kind of the goal. So if you do a blend
Mm-hmm.
with beans, like you could blend anything you want in there. You could put beans, peas, you could add some buckwheat in there. A variety is not a bad thing, but then you're not able to spray it. So if you got an area where you know you have some weed pressure, I would do just straight beans and plan on spraying. Or if you don't care about weed pressure, you could do a blend. I know a lot of guys have loved peas. I don't think peas can handle the grazing pressure as much as beans can. I've seen it. They get nipped on a couple times and they just don't recover as quickly versus a bean. But
Now, would you do that all in the same planting or do separate plantings? Like,
no,
would
it's
you seed into those beans again
yeah, I would
or
come in just to
broadcast?
get the most, yep, to get the most bang for your buck. And it depends how good your crop is, but there's been many times I would just take a hand seeder and take like our cereal grain brassica mix and just hand seed into it. And then as the beans drop their leaves, that stuff will be greening up underneath it. And if you got heavy soil, that works pretty well. If you if the beans are really good though, like you grew a phenomenal bean crop and it's waist high, it's tough to do because those beans are so tall and so thick that stuff isn't going to green up till all the leaves are completely down, and then those plants are so big you actually get a little bit of a leaf mat till they dry up. So then you're better off taking a little of equipment in there, and that's nice about say you plant your whole acre, maybe the outer edges or the corner closest to your clover that will have the most deer damage. That's where you put a little bit of a fall blend in then, or if the whole plot gets beat up, seed overseed the whole thing and you'll get the most bang for your buck that way. The only time that really doesn't work and the seed needs to be incorporated is sand. I've tried a few times just broadcasting seed into sand plots, and unless you get a stupid amount of rain, it just doesn't turn out. But if you got any type of texture to your soil at all and it's heavy, it works really well. I've done it a gazillion times where I've just broadcast seed into it. Otherwise, if you got a grain drill, it's easy to just run through the beans with a grain drill and 3/4 of them will stand back up and you incorporated the seed and it'll come up where the tire tracks were from the tractor. That's probably to get the most tonnage of your food plot is the best way to do it.
Scenario number two here. I'm going to throw in a curveball on this one.
I like
So,
curveballs.
same deal 40-acre property, acre to 2 acres of food plot. Um, but this property in particular is a lights out rut property. Always have bucks cruising on it, hammering the food plots. The only issue is it is in a high deer density area. What are you putting in those food plots that time of year to kill that
So we
time of
have
year?
a high deer density area.
Yes, it's a high deer density area, 40-acre parcel, but it's the best property around come rut. What
Yeah,
would you
the
be putting in that plot to draw those deer in uh, during that rut time to kill a buck?
we talking Iowa or Wisconsin?
Wherever you want.
Well, that would vary on the crop I plant. So say if I was in central northern Wisconsin and it's getting real cold that time of year and we've had a bunch of frost, they're back on corn and beans then. And if you wanted that to last that long on an acre and a half food plot in a high deer density area, you got to do a fence. That's the only guarantee that it'll last that long. And fences they seem intimidating, but they've gotten really easy. If you go to Fleet Farm and get the stuff on sale, and if you don't want to even buy posts, you can go cut some cedars down and make your own post, whatever. But you can spend $300-400 and have a fence that'll last you for years. But say I was down in Iowa and I was on a budget and I had an acre and a half, then I would do like a clover or something like that can handle a ton of grazing pressure. Or you could do a half and half. You could have half in clover. You could have half in a brassicas are a little tougher too. They won't handle the grazing pressure that cereal grains are. So say you couldn't fence, then I would definitely be 50-60% cereal grains mixed with some brassicas because they can handle a ton of grazing pressure. So that stuff it'll stay green in most cases unless you have a stupid amount of deer. I have seen them on some properties eat it right down to the dirt and you have nothing, and then they still have to fence. They'll fence off their fall crops, but that's not our case. You got to start shooting deer if it's that bad, because then they're destroying the landscape if there's that many deer. But I've seen those scenarios where there's just so many deer they eat you out of house and home, and then that it's on the landowner then to you got to handle that problem. You don't want the deer, bring some friends in and take a T-zone or a late season and hammer every slickhead that you can. So, but yeah, if I was targeting say Wisconsin November, I'm putting a fence up just to guarantee I have a crop. And it wouldn't necessarily matter the crop, but if I had an acre and a half, I would plant the whole works and probably a corn bean mix if I had good enough ground to do it. And I would leave a small area to put some greens in, and I would fence my corn and beans off and take them down the end of October. And I'm sitting golden through November. And down in Iowa, you have more options because your growing season's longer. You could put in some highly grazable stuff, and I think it would do just fine unless you had stupid amounts of deer.
Okay. Similar scenario, property size, everything. Late season, but we're in a low density area. Say something like a northern Wisconsin situation, 10 deer per square mile less.
Yep.
What are you doing?
You won't have to. So up there, I definitely want corn and beans for late season, and you probably won't have to fence for the first year or two. But then after that, we've had one property, northern Wisconsin. Actually was an old potato field way up by Manitowish Waters, and we started out. I don't know what they were seeing, 10, 12 deer a night. By year 3, they had 60 deer a night in northern Wisconsin. Well, they were probably drawing every deer within 2 square miles to that property because they had so much food when there's nothing else up there. So that would change with time. You could start out the first year or two doing corn and beans if you only had an acre, acre and a half, and then up there for sure, with the amount of snow they get, I would have a crop that stays above the snow level. If you want to hunt it late season, I wouldn't be that worried. I would always still get some greens in somewhere on my little kill plots or in a little corner or something to have the variety. But for late season, they aren't going to be digging for that up there. Corn would be good because the cobs will stay above the snow line, and the beans, as long as it's not 2 feet of snow, will stay above 2. So yeah, that one's just going to vary with time. So you're going to start out with very few deer, and you'll start pulling a lot of deer until a pack of wolves rolls in. Then that'll change that scenario too, which is a whole new wrench in the situation. But we won't go down that road.